The safe was wide open, yawning with an emptiness that froze my blood. But it was my daughter-in-law's condescending smile that truly stopped my heart. "I'm Adelaide. I'm 72 years old, and I spent 4 decades breathing spice dust and hauling sacks in the Central Market to scrape together what they took in 5 minutes. They think that because I have white hair and walk slowly, my mind has turned to water. But they forgot that before I was a grandmother, I was the boss who built an empire out of nothing." The afternoon heat in New Orleans felt heavier than usual, a sticky humidity that made your clothes cling to your body like an annoying second skin. The ceiling fan spun lazily above us, slicing the dense air with a rhythmic hum that seemed to count the seconds of silence in the living room. I stood in front of the small security box embedded in the closet, the one I had installed 20 years ago when the neighborhood break-ins got ugly. Inside, until that morning, rested my life savings meticulously organized stacks of bills, the fruit of selling cinnamon, dried chilies, pepper, and seeds for 40 years at my shop. The golden seed. Now, there was nothing, just the gray felt bottom gathering dust. I pivoted slowly on my heels, feeling my knees pop. That familiar sound reminding me of the passage of time. Behind me, there they were. Julian, my only son, was staring at his shoes with that cowardice that always hurt me more than any insult. And beside him, Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, arms crossed over her chest with that smug expression she wore whenever she tried to explain how the modern world worked, as if I were a little girl who didn't know how to tie her shoes. "Where is it?" I asked. My voice came out low, raspy, but firm. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me tremble. Vanessa sighed, a long, exaggerated sound, like someone having to explain the 1 times table to a slow student. She pushed her sunglasses up onto her head and took a step toward me, invading my personal space with her sickly sweet perfume that always made me dizzy. "Oh, mother-in-law, please, don't start with your soap opera drama," she said, waving her hand as if swatting a fly. "Nothing is lost. We simply relocated it." Relocated. I repeated the word, feeling it taste like ash in my mouth. "That is my money. My retirement money. The money for my medications, so you wouldn't have to carry the burden if I got sick." "Exactly. It's stagnant money," she interrupted, talking fast. "Julian and I talked about it. The clothing import business we want to start needs liquidity. Banks ask for too much paperwork these days. They take too long. You had that sitting there, rotting, doing absolutely nothing." I looked at Julian, my son, the boy I carried on my back while I weighed out pounds of beans. The man whose college tuition I paid with dollar bills that smelled like cumin and sweat. "Julian," I called out to him. He looked up for a split second, his eyes swimming in guilt, but Vanessa placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that looked like support, but I knew was pure control. He dropped his head again. "Mom, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity," he muttered, almost inaudible. "We're going to pay you back, with interest." Without asking me, I insisted, feeling a sharp pain in my chest, right below my sternum. My hand drifted to my heart instinctively. "If we had asked, you would have said no, mother-in-law. You're too old-fashioned for business. You're afraid of success," Vanessa said with a nervous, cruel little laugh. "Besides, let's be realistic, Adelaide. You're 72. What do you need all that hoarded money for? It's not like you're going to travel to Europe." And then, she said it, the phrase that lodged in my memory like a rusty knife. Vanessa stepped a little closer, dropped her voice to a conspiratorial whisper, and let it out. "We used it for the business, mother-in-law. You weren't going to use it anyway. At your age, all you need is a bed and food, and we provide that for you. That money was dead in there. We gave it life." I felt the floor shift beneath my feet. It wasn't just the theft, it was the total erasure of my existence. To her, I was no longer a person with desires, plans, or a future. I was an old piece of furniture waiting to be dragged out to the trash. You weren't going to use it anyway, as if my life had ended the day I closed the shop. As if I had no right to dream, or simply to have the security of my own hard work. I leaned against the doorframe to keep from falling. My eyes drifted to the corner table, where my old accounting ledger rested, the one with the worn leather covers, where I recorded every penny that entered and left my life since 1980. They saw a cheap old woman. They didn't see the 4 a.m. mornings receiving delivery trucks at the wholesale market. They didn't see the hands cracked by the cold of the meat lockers. They didn't see the times I ate plain rice just so Julian could have new school books. That is a lot of money, Vanessa, I said, trying to control my breathing. It's almost $100,000. That's not something you just borrow without signing a piece of paper. It's already done, Adelaide, she cut in, losing her patience and dropping all formalities with shameless disrespect. We already made the deposits to the suppliers this morning. The money is already circulating. Be happy. You're a partner in a modern startup now, not some shop smelling of rancid spices. Indignation crawled up my throat like hot bile. I wanted to scream. I wanted to lunge at her and claw that smug smile right off her face. I wanted to shake Julian until he remembered who his mother was. But then, something in my brain clicked. A memory. Sharp, precise, and cold. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the damp air of the house. I let go of the doorframe and stood up straight. I smoothed the wrinkles of my floral skirt with dignity. You made the deposits this morning? I asked, with a calm that seemed to startle them. Yes, first thing, Julian replied, clearly relieved I wasn't screaming. Everything is legal, Mom, through the new company accounts. I see, I said. I walked slowly to my favorite armchair, the one with the embroidered cushion my mother made, and sat down. Vanessa relaxed her shoulders, victorious. She thought she had won. She thought my silence was resignation, the typical submission of the old woman who depends on her family. Well, if it's already done, it's already done, I said, forcing a sad smile. You're right. Maybe I just don't understand how these things work anymore. I just hope it goes well for you. That's what I like to hear, mother-in-law, Vanessa said, clapping her hands softly. Sensible. You'll see, in a year we'll double it for you. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have to go celebrate closing the deal with some partners. They walked out of the room as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just stripped me of my security and my dignity. I heard the car engines start and fade away down the cobblestone street. I was left alone in the silence of the house. The afternoon light poured through the window in golden streams, illuminating the dust particles dancing in the air. I looked at my hands, those hands full of age spots and bulging veins, hands that knew how to work, hands that knew how to count. What my dear daughter-in-law and my naive son didn't know, what their arrogance prevented them from researching, was the recent origin of those bills. They thought that money had been accumulating for years under a mattress or in that safe, bill upon bill, old and forgotten. But they were wrong. I stood up with an effort I barely felt anymore, propelled by a new energy, cold and calculating. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. As I drank, I looked at the calendar hanging on the wall. Yesterday's date was circled in red. Yesterday, just yesterday, I had gone to the bank, not to just any teller window, but to the office of the branch manager, Mr. Reynolds, a man I had known since he was a cashier, and I was one of the most respected merchants in the market. I had withdrawn the entirety of my investment funds. The reason? I was going to buy the commercial space next to mine, a property that had been tied up in litigation for years and was finally free. The seller, an old man distrustful of banks and technology, demanded payment in cash to sign the deed before the notary tomorrow. Because of the amount and the risk of moving that much cash across the city, Mr. Reynolds had insisted on activating the security protocol for high-risk transactions. Adelaide, he had told me with his deep voice. For your security, these stacks are not standard. They are issued directly from the central vault, and the serial numbers of every single $100 bill have been scanned and registered in a ledger tied to your withdrawal. If someone robs you on the way, if these bills show up in any other bank or business that deposits them, it will trigger an immediate alert. It's like they have a GPS. I had nodded, grateful for the precaution, and locked the money in my home's safe just for one night, waiting for the appointment with the notary. We made the deposits to the suppliers this morning. I smiled. It wasn't a sweet, grandmotherly smile. It was the smile I used when I negotiated the price of a ton of habanero peppers and knew the seller was desperate. If they had used the money to buy things on the street, spending it little by little, maybe, just maybe, it would have taken months to track them. But greed and stupidity are terrible advisors. They had taken my money, marked money, registered and protected by federal anti-money laundering and fraud protocols, and deposited it directly into the banking system through commercial accounts. To the bank, that wouldn't look like a family loan. It would look like aggravated robbery against a senior citizen. Or worse, a suspicious operation where funds withdrawn by one account holder magically appeared hours later in third-party accounts without legal justification. I looked at the landline phone on the little table. I could call Julian. I could warn them. I could tell them to run back to the bank and try to reverse the transaction before the central system processed the serial numbers at the end of the day. You weren't going to use it anyway. The phrase echoed again. I felt the contempt, the ease with which they discarded me. No, I wasn't going to call them. They had made an adult decision, and adults face consequences. For years, I endured Vanessa looking down her nose at me, criticizing my clothes, my food, the way I spoke. I endured her treating me like a maid in my own home. But stealing my life's work and telling me to my face that they did it because I was already on my way out, that severed any tie of blood or loyalty. I sat down in front of my old accounting ledger. I opened a fresh page. With my fountain pen, the one my husband gave me before he died, I wrote, today's date. Debit, dignity and a lifetime of savings. Credit, Vanessa and Julian. Memo. Life lesson. The ringing of the telephone shattered the afternoon's silence. It wasn't my cell phone, it was the house line. I let it ring. 1, 2, 3 times. I knew who it was. Mr. Reynolds. He must have already received the alert that the bills registered under my security protocol had surfaced in an unauthorized transaction. I picked up the receiver calmly. Hello? Adelaide, it's Reynolds from the bank. His voice sounded agitated, deeply concerned. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. The security system has detected a severe irregularity with the funds you withdrew yesterday. The bills have been flagged in a suspicious merchant deposit. We are freezing the receiving accounts and notifying the fraud unit right now. Did you authorize a wire transfer to a company called Global Fashion Trends? I took a theatrical pause. I could hear the bank manager holding his breath on the other end. I looked at the framed photo on the wall of Julian at his college graduation. Then I looked at the empty space in the closet where my safe used to be. No, Mr. Reynolds, I said, my voice clear and unwavering. I do not know that company, and I have not authorized anyone to touch my money. My God. Adelaide, this is automatically classified as grand theft and major bank fraud. Because of the amount, the federal prosecutor gets involved automatically. I am going to have to proceed. Proceed, Mr. Reynolds. Proceed. I hung up the phone gently. The sun was beginning to set, staining the sky in shades of orange and violet, the classic colors of a coastal dusk. I felt strangely light, as if a massive weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I was no longer the useless old woman who wasn't going to use her money. Now, I was the master of the destiny of those who thought they were smarter than me. I headed to the kitchen to make myself some coffee. I like it strong, with 2 spoonfuls of sugar and a pinch of cinnamon, just how I drank it before opening the shop. As the water boiled, I thought about the look on Vanessa's face when she tried to swipe her credit card to pay for their celebration dinner, only for the terminal to decline it. The night was going to be long, but for the first time in a long time, I was in no rush. The game had just begun, and though they didn't know it yet, they were already in checkmate. The black coffee steamed in the enamel mug, releasing that bitter, comforting aroma that always managed to center me. My hands, the ones Vanessa looked at with such disgust because of the age spots, weren't shaking at all. I held the cup with the steadiness of someone who had gripped the steering wheel of a cargo truck on pothole-ridden roads under torrential rain. Mr. Reynolds had already hung up, but his promise to proceed still floated in the hot kitchen air like a divine sentence. I walked slowly down the hallway. The house was silent. That heavy silence that lingers after a storm, or right before an earthquake. My footsteps echoed on the cool tiles. I didn't feel guilty. Should I? A mother always protects her children, they say. But a mother also has an obligation to teach them that fire burns. And Julian, my Julian, had just shoved his entire hand into the bonfire to please a woman who handled him like a rag doll. I walked into my bedroom. It wasn't the room of a decrepit old lady, even if Vanessa insisted on mentally decorating it with the smell of mothballs. It was the sanctuary of a woman who had lived. I approached the closet, not the side with the empty safe, but the very back, behind the winter coats that you almost never need down here on the Gulf Coast. There, hidden inside an old leather suitcase that belonged to my husband, was my true archive. I pulled out a red cardboard accordion folder, the kind they don't even sell anymore. The elastic band was shot, but the papers inside were pristine. Vanessa thought my power resided solely in the cash locked in the safe. Poor, delusional girl. Cash is just paper. True power in this country is signed documents, official seals, and above all, favors owed. I sat on the edge of the bed and spread out the documents. There was the deed to the house, free and clear since 1995. There were the property titles to the 2 commercial spaces at the market, the Golden Seed and the Fertile Land, which I rented out to a distant nephew. And most importantly, there was a yellowed business card with a phone number handwritten on the back. Ernest Tate, Notary Public, 14. Ernest Tate wasn't just a lawyer. He was the son of Miss Kathy, a woman I sold merchandise to on credit for 2 straight years when her husband got sick and no one else would front her a dime. Ernest went to law school because his mother was able to keep her food stall running with my fronted spices. He called me godmother, even though it wasn't official in any church. I looked at the wall clock. It was 6 p.m. Ernest was still at his office. That man worked until he ran out of coffee or ink. I dialed the number on my cell phone, the device Vanessa claimed I only used to read gossip. Notary 14, a secretary answered. Mr. Tate, please. Tell him it's Adelaide from the market. The attorney is in a meeting, ma'am. I don't know if... Tell him it's Adelaide. He will take my call. There was a brief silence, hold music, and then Ernest's deep, warm voice. Godmother, what a miracle hearing from you. Is everything set for the property purchase tomorrow? I have the draft of the deed ready. Ernest, son, I said, keeping my voice serene. There's been a change of plans. I am not buying the property tomorrow. What? Did the sellers back out? Because if they did, I'll sue them for breach of contract. I have the preliminary agreement. No, Ernest, the money. There was a problem with the money, but I'm not calling you about that. The bank and the feds are already handling that. I heard the hiss of his breath on the other end. Ernest was sharp. He instantly understood the gravity of the situation the moment I mentioned the feds. What do you need, godmother? His tone shifted. It became professional. Razor sharp. I need to bulletproof the house. And I need to revoke the power of attorney I signed over to Julian 3 years ago for administrative paperwork. I want you to draft a document specifying that under no circumstances do my son or his wife have any rights to my home or my businesses while I am breathing. And I want to establish a lifetime usufruct in my favor, shielded against third-party liens. Godmother, Julian got into trouble. Julian got involved with the wrong woman and the wrong money, Ernest. And I'm afraid that when the water reaches his neck, he's going to try to use my house as a life raft. I won't allow it. Understood. I am drafting the documents right now. You can come in first thing tomorrow morning to sign. I'll be there at 8 sharp. Thank you, son. I hung up. I felt stronger. My resources weren't just dollar bills. They were decades of built loyalty, of an impeccable reputation. Vanessa had followers on social media. I had flesh and blood allies who owed me their lives or their livelihoods. I stood up and walked to the vanity mirror. I stared at myself. The wrinkles around my eyes were deep. Yes, my hair was a white cloud, but my eyes were still black and hard as whole peppercorns. Over the last 5 years, ever since Julian married Vanessa, I had been shrinking myself. I made myself small to fit into their lives without being a nuisance. I stopped giving advice about the business because things have changed, Mom. I stopped cooking my fragrant stews because Vanessa was disgusted by the smell of cumin on the curtains. I became a ghost in my own home, apologizing for existing, grateful for crumbs of attention. What stupidity. I remembered the day I negotiated my first shipment of Ceylon cinnamon. I was 35 years old, a recent widow, surrounded by 5 men who looked at me like I was dessert. They wanted to charge me double for the freight. I stood on a wooden crate, looked them in the eye, one by one, and told them exactly what their cargo was worth, how much they were losing for every hour the truck sat idle, and exactly who their mistresses were down at the port. In the end, they charged me a fair rate and even helped me unload. That woman was still in there. She was just asleep, anesthetized by the blind love for a son who didn't know how to value sacrifice. Vanessa had said, "You weren't going to use it anyway." That phrase burned worse than the theft. It was total dehumanization. To her, old age was a waiting room for death. A dead zone where you don't produce, you don't dream, you don't live, you just wait. I walked into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. It was full of the diet crap Vanessa bought: flavorless yogurts, sad lettuce, turkey ham that tasted like plastic. But way in the back, in a hidden Tupperware, I had my stash. Achiote paste I made myself, minced garlic in oil, dried chilies. The internal reality of this house was very different from the facade they put up. They lived on appearances. The brand new car on credit, the designer clothes paid in monthly installments, the dinners at expensive restaurants just to post a picture. I lived on realities. My money was mine. My house was mine. My history was mine. They saw a dependent old woman. I saw 2 parasites who had just bitten the hand that fed them, entirely unaware that the hand was coated in poison. I decided I wasn't going to hide. I wasn't going to lock myself in my room and cry. Quite the opposite. I pulled out a massive pot. I was going to cook. I was going to make mole. Mole takes hours. It demands patience. It requires grinding, toasting, mixing. The smell would saturate the entire house. Vanessa would hate coming home and having her designer clothes reek of chocolate, chili, and spices. Perfect. While I toasted the almonds on the griddle, I started mapping out the plan in my head. I couldn't confront them directly with the truth about the bank just yet. Mr. Reynolds had said they would freeze the accounts, but that could take a few hours, or it might not reflect until tomorrow when they tried to make a massive transaction. If I told them now, "The bank knows you stole it," they would panic. They might run. They might try to physically force me to sign something. They might turn violent. Desperation makes people dangerous, and Julian was weak, but Vanessa was a cornered cat when things didn't go her way. No, the strategy had to be silence. Let them believe they had won. Let them get overconfident. Overconfidence is the mother of all mistakes. I listened to the sound of the almonds crackling in the heat. The roasted aroma filled the kitchen. "You'll see, Vanessa," I muttered to myself as I stirred with the wooden spoon. "You'll see exactly what this useless old woman is capable of." The plan had 3 phases. First, secure my remaining assets tomorrow with Ernest. Second, maintain the facade of submission tonight so they don't suspect the guillotine has already dropped. Third, be in the front row when the world comes crashing down on them. But I needed something else. I needed to know exactly what they had done with the money, aside from paying suppliers. I knew my son. Julian couldn't hold $100,000 in his hands without buying himself a toy. I went into the living room and checked the drawer where they kept the mail. Nothing interesting. But then I saw Vanessa's tablet on the sofa. She had forgotten it in her rush to go celebrate. I sat down and picked it up. Vanessa always mocked me, saying I didn't know how to use technology. "Oh, mother-in-law, put that down before you mess up the settings." What she didn't know was that I took a computer class at the community center 2 years ago not to browse the web, but to digitize my accounting. I knew the basics, and I knew something far more important: Vanessa's passcode. I had watched her type it 1,000 times. It was so predictable. Vain success, 888. I swiped my finger and typed the code. The screen unlocked. My heart beat a little faster, not out of fear, but from the adrenaline of the hunt. I opened her email app. It was already logged in. I searched the inbox. Order confirmation. Reservation confirmed. I opened the latest email, received 2 hours ago from Global Travel Agency. Subject: Mediterranean cruise confirmation. Presidential suite. Passengers: Vanessa Ortiz and Julian Mendez. Departure date: 3 weeks. Status: paid in full. A dry laugh clawed its way up my throat. You weren't going to use it anyway. It's not like you're going to travel to Europe, Vanessa's words echoed. The irony. They robbed me under the guise of an urgent import business with waiting suppliers. And the very first thing they did was buy a luxury vacation with my sweat, with the money I earned hauling sacks until my back screamed. I kept scrolling. There was another email from Gulf Coast Auto. Subject: down payment for luxury SUV. Amount: $10,000. There was the liquidity for the business. Clothes, they said. Suppliers, they said. They were just common thieves, blowing the loot before it even cooled off. I closed the email and placed the tablet exactly where I found it. My hands gripped the edge of the sofa tightly. The initial indignation was morphing into something colder, something harder. It wasn't just disappointment anymore. It was disgust. They stole my future to fund their present whims. They condemned me to poverty so they could toast with champagne on a boat. I went back to the kitchen. The mole needed attention. I added the chocolate, watching it melt into the thick, dark sauce. It was like my rage, dense, dark, simmering over low heat. Suddenly, I heard the noise of the electric gate. They were back, returning from their celebration. I smoothed my apron, ran a hand through my hair, and took a deep breath. I had to be the best actress in the world. I had to be the submissive Adelaide, the little old lady accepting her fate. The kitchen door swung open. They walked in laughing, their breath smelling of wine and that fake euphoria that comes from easy money. Vanessa was carrying several shopping bags from high-end department stores. Julian trailed behind her, carrying even more packages. "Ugh, what is that smell?" Vanessa complained the second she walked in, wrinkling her nose. "Mother-in-law, what are you cooking at this hour? It reeks like a street market." I turned around slowly, the wooden spoon in my hand dripping dark sauce. "It's mole, Vanessa," I said softly, lowering my gaze. I thought you'd want a nice dinner to celebrate your new business. I wanted to be useful." Julian stopped, looking a bit ashamed. "Thanks, Mom. It smells good." Vanessa let out a little laugh and dropped the bags on the clean table. "Oh, mother-in-law, how cute." But we are completely stuffed. We ate at that fancy seafood place down by the harbor. You wouldn't understand the menu, but anyway, since you made it, put it in the fridge. Maybe the cleaning lady will eat it tomorrow. I looked at the bags. Expensive brands. Shoes, perfumes, Garbage bought with my marked savings. With every transaction, they were leaving a glowing neon trail for the bank. They were like children walking through mud in white shoes. "That's fine, dear," I said, turning off the stove. "I just wanted to celebrate with you. I'm glad the business is taking off so fast." "It's going great, Mom," Julian said, avoiding my eyes. "You'll see. In a few months we'll pay you back everything, and then some." "Of course we will," Vanessa added, stepping up to me and giving my shoulder a condescending pat. "And don't worry about the money. We know how to manage it better. You just rest. Watch your soap operas. Let us young people move the world." I felt her cold touch. It took everything in me not to pull away. "You're right," I said, looking up and meeting her eyes with an intensity that made her blink for a second. "Young people move the world. But sometimes, Vanessa, the world spins very fast, and you can get dizzy." She frowned, as if she had detected a veiled threat, but she quickly dismissed it. "I'm just an old woman. What threat could I possibly be?" "Well, we're going to bed. Tomorrow we have a very busy day managing the company," she said, making air quotes with her fingers and winking at Julian. I watched them leave the kitchen and walk up the stairs to their bedroom, loaded down with their shopping bags and their arrogance. I was alone again with my bubbling mole. I turned off the kitchen light, but I stayed there in the shadows, listening to their footsteps on the floor above, listening to them laugh. They didn't know that tomorrow, when they tried to swipe those cards or move a single cent more, red lights would flash across every screen in the national banking system. They didn't know the family lawyer was currently drafting their eviction from my estate. I served myself a little bit of mole on a small plate and tasted it. It was perfect. Spicy, sweet, complex. "Bon appetit, Adelaide," I whispered to myself in the dark. The night was just beginning, and I needed to lay out my clothes for tomorrow. Tomorrow, I wouldn't wear the grandmother dress. Tomorrow, I would wear my black tailored suit, the one I wore to the Merchants Guild assemblies, because tomorrow, I wasn't going to buy a building. Tomorrow, I was going to take my life back. Vanessa's smile was still burned into my mind, but it didn't hurt anymore. Now, that smile was the fuel for my patience. "Sleep well tonight. It will be the last night you sleep peacefully." I woke up at 4:30 inches the morning, as if an internal clock made of ancient gears had shaken my shoulder. My body remembered that hour better than my mind did. It was the exact time the freight trucks arrived at the market, when the air was still cool and smelled of salt water and wet earth. For a split second, I forgot the robbery. I forgot the betrayal. But as I turned my head and saw the closet door cracked open, reality crashed down on me like a 100-pound sack of beans. I didn't allow myself a single second of self-pity. Today was not a day for crying. It was a day to armor whatever was left of my empire. I took a cold shower to wake up my nerves. I opened the wardrobe and pulled out the black tailored suit I hadn't worn since my husband's funeral. The fabric smelled faintly of confinement and dried lavender, but as I slipped it on, I felt my posture change. The jacket was a little loose in the shoulders. The years have eaten away at my flesh a bit, but I buttoned it all the way to the collar. I looked in the mirror and pulled my white hair back into a tight bun, without leaving a single strand loose. I no longer looked like the sweet grandma cooking mole. I looked like the woman who could close a deal with a single glare. I left the bedroom in silence. The house was wrapped in that heavy stillness belonging to those who sleep without a conscience. I walked past Julian and Vanessa's door. I could hear my son's soft snoring. They were sleeping the sleep of the unjust, believing that stolen money had purchased them eternal peace. I walked down the stairs, avoiding the third step, the one that always creaked. I stepped out onto the street just as the sun began to paint the clouds pink over the Gulf. I didn't use a ride-sharing app. I walked to the avenue and hailed a cab the old-fashioned way, just like I always did. "Notary 14, young man," I told the driver. The morning air cleared my lungs. As the taxi cruised down the boulevard, I mentally reviewed my checklist. The cash was already lost in their hands, but the house and the commercial properties were sacred. Vanessa had said, "You weren't going to use it anyway." That phrase was still my gasoline. I arrived at Ernest Tate's office before they even rolled up the metal shutters. When his secretary arrived, she was startled to see me standing there, firm as a pillar of salt. "Mrs. Adelaide, the attorney is just arriving." "Don't worry, honey. I'll wait for him." I have all the patience that young people lack. Ernest arrived 5 minutes later, eyes red, a folder tucked under his arm. Seeing me, his look of concern morphed into deep respect. He ushered me into his office, which smelled of old tobacco and wood polish. "Godmother, I prepared everything you asked for last night," he said, spreading the documents across the mahogany desk. "Here is the revocation of the power of attorney you granted Julian 3 years ago, and here is the establishment of the family trust and the lifetime usufruct for the house and the commercial properties." I read every line with the scrutiny of someone picking weevils out of rice. My eyes, though tired, didn't miss a single comma. "Ernest, I want you to add a clause," I said, pointing to the paragraph regarding the property. "Specify that any attempt to sell, mortgage, or place a lien on this property by third parties without my physical signature and fingerprint will be considered null and fraudulent from inception." That's redundant, Godmother. The law already protects you. But if it makes you feel safer— It's not about safety, Ernest. It's about clarity. I want it so that if they ever try anything, a judge won't have a shred of doubt about my will. I signed the papers with force, so much so that I almost tore the page with the pen. As I pressed my thumbprint in blue ink, I felt like I was driving a stake into the ground around my life. Julian no longer had legal power over me. He could no longer sign paperwork in my name. As of this exact second, legally speaking, he was a total stranger to my financial affairs. "And regarding the incident with the money?" Ernest asked delicately, blotting the ink. "The bank and fate will handle that, son. You just lock these papers in your most secure safe and make sure they don't leave this room unless I come here in person." I walked out of the notary's office at 10 in the morning. The sun was already biting. My phone buzzed in my purse. It was a text message from the bank. An automated security alert I have turned on. Attempted charge for $2,500 at Liberty Department Store. Declined. Account under investigation for fraud protocols. I smiled. The first domino had just fallen. I returned home calmly. I walked through the front door, and the shift in atmosphere was immediate. Tension hung in the air like thick smoke. Vanessa was pacing the living room with her phone pressed to her ear, wearing a silk robe she had probably bought yesterday. Julian was sitting on the sofa, pale, staring at his own debit card as if it were an alien artifact. "This is impossible!" Vanessa screamed into the phone. "I have plenty of credit limit. I made a purchase yesterday and it went through perfectly. What do you mean, preventative freeze?" "I want to speak to a supervisor, you stupid girl." I took off my black jacket slowly and hung it on the coat rack by the door. I walked past them without saying a word, heading straight for the kitchen. "Mom." Julian's voice cracked, trembling. Did you go to the bank today?" I stopped in the kitchen doorway. I turned around slowly. My face was a stone wall. "Good morning to you too, son. I went to Mass and took a walk. Why? Do you need something?" "It's just— the cards aren't working," he stammered. "The one from the new company account. I tried to pay the car insurance, and it bounced. And Vanessa wants to buy some furniture online, and it won't go through either." Vanessa slammed her phone down in a fury, tossing it onto a cushion. "It's this third world bank," she yelled, glaring at me with disdain. "I'm sure they flagged a large transaction yesterday and locked everything for security. They are so useless. I have to go down to the branch and yell at them a bit so they unlock it." "Are you sure that's what it is?" I said, my voice so sweet it sounded like poisoned syrup. "Banks are very picky about money that just appears out of nowhere. They have very smart systems." Vanessa narrowed her eyes at me, as if trying to decipher a language she didn't speak. For the first time, I noticed a spark of doubt in her arrogance, but she quickly snuffed it out. "Oh, mother-in-law, don't start with your conspiracy theories. It's just bureaucratic red tape. I'm going to get ready and go fix this. Julian, you go to the dealership. Tell them the down payment will clear tomorrow. Tell them not to cancel the reservation on the SUV." I walked into the kitchen and started making my breakfast. Eggs with spicy chorizo. The smell of grease and chili pepper filled the house. I heard Vanessa huff from the living room. "Disgusting. That foul stench again," she yelled. "Julian, tell your mother to air out the house." Normally, I would have rushed to open the windows, apologizing, shrinking myself. Not today. Today, I turned on my old radio, classic jazz. I cranked the volume up. I sat down to eat at the kitchen table, savoring every bite. Julian walked in. He had dark circles under his eyes. "Mom, please turn down the music. Vanessa has a migraine." "This is my house, Julian," I said, without stopping my meal. "And in my house, we listen to music, and we eat food with flavor. If Vanessa has a headache, she can take an aspirin, or she can go to her company to rest." Julian froze. He opened his mouth to say something, but closed it. He had never heard me speak like this, not yelling, but with absolute authority. Are you okay?" he asked, confused. "I'm better than ever, son. Are you okay? You look worried. The import business isn't going as expected?" He looked away. Guilt was eating at him. I knew it, but his cowardice was stronger. "Just technical issues, nothing serious. Hey, Mom, about the money." "Yes?" "We need you to sign some papers. The accountant says that since the funds originated from your account, we need a gift letter to justify the income to the IRS so they don't hit us with massive taxes. It's just a formality." I set my fork down on the plate. The sound of metal against ceramic was sharp. Final. There it was. The final trap. They wanted to legalize the theft so that if I complained later, they'd have a piece of paper signed by me saying it was a gift. I wiped my mouth with a cloth napkin, slowly, very slowly. "I am not signing anything, Julian." "But Mom, it's necessary. If you don't, the IRS is going to take a huge cut." "Then let them take it. You two are modern entrepreneurs, aren't you? You'll figure out how to solve it. I, as your wife pointed out, am too old-fashioned for business. And my signature is worthless to you anyway, isn't it?" Julian turned red. "Don't be difficult. We already have the money. It's just to regularize it." I said no. I stood up and carried my plate to the sink. "And I'll tell you one more thing, Julian. The gardener came today. I told him to change the lock on the back gate. The keys you two have won't work on that entrance anymore." "What?" "Why?" "Because I value security. And lately, I feel like things are entering and leaving this house without my permission." I walked out of the kitchen and crossed paths with Vanessa coming down the stairs, fully dressed and ready for the bank. She was wearing massive sunglasses and carrying a designer purse that cost what I used to make in 3 months selling cinnamon. "I'm leaving," she announced without looking at me. "Julian, hurry up. I don't have all day. Mother-in-law, if a delivery comes, sign for the boxes. It's my dresses for the cruise." I stopped at the foot of the stairs. I looked up at her, but I felt 10 feet taller than she was. "I won't be here, Vanessa." She stopped dead in her tracks and pulled her sunglasses down to the tip of her nose. "What do you mean you won't be here? Where are you going to go? You never leave the house." "I have things to do. My own business." "Business? What business could a woman your age possibly have other than going to the pharmacy?" She let out a mocking laugh. "Please, Adelaide, don't be ridiculous. Stay here and sign for the packages. They are important." "If they are so important, you should have stayed to receive them. I am not your doorman. I am not your secretary, and I am not your maid." The silence that followed was absolute. Even the hum of the refrigerator seemed to stop. Vanessa opened her mouth, indignant. Her cheeks flushed a furious red beneath her makeup. "How dare you speak to me like that? We support you. We live here to take care of you." "You live here because you don't pay rent," I cut her off, my voice cold as ice. "You live here because I allow it, and as for supporting me, I think with $100,000 of my savings, I am supporting myself pretty damn well, don't you think?" Vanessa took a step back as if I had slapped her. Julian came running when he heard the tone of my voice. "What's going on? Why are you fighting?" "Your mother," Vanessa said, pointing at me with a trembling acrylic nail. "She's gone crazy. She's disrespecting us." "Respect is earned, Vanessa, and it is lost very quickly," I said, stepping closer to her, invading her space for the first time. She smelled of expensive perfume and fear. "Go to the bank. Run. Mr. Reynolds must be anxiously waiting for you." "You know the manager?" Vanessa asked, her voice dropping to a whisper, finally connecting the dots. "For 30 years, he's a very meticulous man. He likes clean numbers, and he hates thieves." I didn't say another word. I turned around and walked up the stairs toward my bedroom, my back straight and my step firm. I felt their eyes drilling into the back of my neck. I felt their confusion mutating into sheer panic. I heard agitated whispers below. "What did she mean by that?" Vanessa said, her pitch rising. "Julian, do you think she—" "I don't know, Vane. Let's just go. We have to withdraw that cash and move it to another account before this gets worse. If she actually talked to the manager, they could really lock us out." "Move, idiot." I heard the front door slam and the car engine roar as they sped off. I peeked out my bedroom window and watched them drive away. They were heading straight into the lion's den. They didn't know the freeze wasn't a system error. They didn't know that when they walked into that branch, they wouldn't find a customer service window, but a closed office and most likely a pair of federal agents waiting to ask very uncomfortable questions about the origin of those funds. I sat down in my armchair and picked up my knitting. My hands weren't shaking. I felt a strange peace, the peace you feel when you stop swimming against the current and start redirecting the river. I checked the clock. It was 11:30. In half an hour, they would be sitting in front of Mr. Reynolds' desk. The house phone rang again. I let it ring. 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Finally, the answering machine picked up. "Mrs. Adelaide, this is Lucy from Global Travel Agency. We have a problem with the cruise reservation under the name Vanessa Ortiz. The card used for payment has been reported as fraudulent, and the cruise line has automatically canceled the tickets. We need you to contact us urgently to clear this up, or you will lose the deposit." I listened to the message and let out a short, dry laugh. The cruise had sunk before it even set sail. I stood up and walked into the hallway. There was a framed photo hanging there, an old picture from the grand opening of the Golden Seed. I was young, strong, carrying a sack of spices, smiling with pride. For years I had walked past that photo without looking at it, feeling like a shadow of that woman. Today, I looked at it and winked. "I'm back," I whispered. The sound of a police siren started to swell in the distance. I didn't know if they were coming this way or if it was just a coincidence, but the wail felt like the perfect soundtrack for the end of their party. The house was silent, but it was no longer an empty silence. It was the silence of a reclaimed throne. I went to the kitchen to pour myself another coffee. This time, I splashed a little anise liquor in it. I deserved it. The silent execution was over. Now came the noise, and I had front row seats. The phone rang at 12:15, shattering the peace I had managed to build with my coffee in the quiet house. It wasn't a normal ring. It sounded urgent, insistent, like the cry of a child who just fell and scraped his knees. I set my mug on the table with a calmness that surprised even me. I knew who it was, I knew where they were, and I knew the time for gentle lessons was over. I picked up the receiver, and before I could say a single word, Julian's voice exploded on the other end, high-pitched and broken by panic. "Mom! Mom, you have to come down here!" he screamed. And in the background, I could hear deep voices, security radios, and the unmistakable sound of fear. They won't let us leave. They're saying we're criminals. Mom, please. Calm down, Julian. Breathe, I said, looking at my clean-trimmed fingernails, nails that no longer hauled boxes, but now carried the weight of the truth. Where are you? At the bank, in Mr. Reynolds' office, he sobbed. Vanessa tried to yell at them, and they called security. They're saying the money is flagged by the Financial Intelligence Unit. Mom, they're calling it money laundering. You have to come tell them you gave it to us. Come, clear up this mistake. There was a scuffle, and then Vanessa's voice, shrill and desperate, snatched the phone. Mother-in-law, stop playing hard to get and get down here right now, she bellowed, though her voice was shaking. These idiots are holding us hostage. Tell them you loaned us the capital for the company. If you don't come, they're going to take us to the federal prosecutor. I sighed, a long sound that expelled the very last remnants of pity I might have had. I'm on my way, I said dryly. Hurry up, take a cab. I will go at my own pace, Vanessa. At my own pace. I hung up. I didn't run. I went to my bedroom. I touched up my terracotta lipstick, the one I always used for meetings with difficult suppliers, and grabbed my purse. Inside, I carried the documents Ernest, the notary, had handed me that morning. They were my shield and my sword. I stepped out into the street. The midday heat was crushing. The sun bounced off the asphalt, making the air dance, but I felt an icy chill in my stomach. I hailed a cab with a raised hand, firm. To the downtown bank, young man. No rush, but don't dawdle. As the car cruised down the boulevard, looking out at the choppy water to my right, I thought about all the times I forgave. I forgave when Vanessa threw out my potted plants because they attracted mosquitoes. I forgave when Julian forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. I forgave them for stripping my voice from my own home. But the theft, the premeditated robbery, taking advantage of my supposed old age, that had no forgiveness. That had consequences. I arrived at the branch. The automatic glass doors slid open, exhaling a gust of air conditioning that dried the sweat on my forehead. The atmosphere inside was tense. The tellers were stealing glances toward the manager's glass-walled office. There they were. Julian was sitting in a low chair with his head in his hands, his shirt soaked with sweat down the back. Vanessa was standing, waving her arms in front of Mr. Reynolds' desk, her mascara running and her expensive blowout ruined. 2 armed security guards flanked the office door. I walked toward them. The sound of my low heels echoed on the marble floor. Click, click, click. The sound of authority. Mr. Reynolds saw me through the glass and stood up immediately. He signaled the guards to let me through. I opened the door, and silence fell over the room like a concrete slab. Mom! Julian jumped up, his eyes bloodshot. Thank God! Tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Vanessa spun around, her eyes injected with fury and terror. Finally, she spat. Tell this low-level employee to unfreeze my accounts and let us go. It is my money. Mr. Reynolds, a serious, gray-haired man who had watched my fortune grow dollar by dollar, looked at me with respect and offered me the main chair across from his desk. Adelaide, please, have a seat. Would you like a glass of water? Thank you, Reynolds. Water would be fine. I sat with my back perfectly straight, crossing my hands in my lap. Julian and Vanessa stared at me, waiting for me to pull out a magic wand, waiting for me to revert to the cover-up mom who fixed all their disasters. Reynolds returned with the water and sat down. He opened a folder on his desk. Inside were photos of the banded cash and copies of the deposit slips Vanessa and Julian had filled out. Mrs. Adelaide, Reynolds began in an official tone. As I informed you on the phone, the security system detected that the Series Alpha 7 bills you withdrew yesterday under custody protocols for a real estate purchase were deposited this morning into 3 different accounts. One under the name Global Fashion Trends, another to a travel agency, and a third to an auto dealership. Reynolds paused and looked at Vanessa over his glasses. The woman here claims that you voluntarily handed over the cash your entire retirement savings for. He checked his notes with disbelief. High-risk investments and personal expenses, Vanessa interjected, slamming her hand on the desk. And it's true! She gave it to us. She's an old woman. She forgets things, but she gave it to us yesterday at the house. Tell him, Adelaide. Tell him you gave us the money for the business. I looked at Vanessa. For the first time, I saw pure terror beneath her mask of arrogance. She knew that if I said no, her fantasy life was over. Adelaide, please, Julian begged, stepping closer and grabbing my hand. His palm was cold and clammy. If you don't say you gave it to us, they're going to prosecute us for fraud and grand theft. It's prison, Mom. Prison. I pulled my hand away from his gently, like someone brushing lint off a dress. Julian, son, I said, my voice soft. Do you remember when you were 10 years old and you stole change from the cash register to buy candy? What? Mom, what does that have to do with anything right now? He asked desperately. I told you stealing was wrong. I told you money is earned with sweat, not with sticky fingers. I turned to Mr. Reynolds. The room seemed to shrink. Mr. Reynolds, yesterday I withdrew that money, the fruit of 40 years hauling sacks and breathing dust with a specific purpose. To buy the commercial space next to mine to secure my old age. I locked the money in my safe. This morning, the safe was empty. Liar! Vanessa screamed, lunging at me, but one of the guards caught her by the arm. You lying old witch! You knew! You watched us celebrate! You gave us the money because you're useless now! Sit down, ma'am, the guard ordered, forcing her back. Continue, Adelaide, Reynolds said, taking notes. I did not sign any loan documents, I continued, ignoring my daughter-in-law's shrieks. I did not authorize any wire transfers to that shell company, and I most certainly did not authorize my savings for food and medicine to be used for a luxury cruise or a brand new SUV. Julian collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Mom, why are you doing this to us? He moaned. We're your family. Exactly, Julian. You are my family, and that is why this hurts me more than anyone. My voice hardened, losing all its softness. You robbed me. You broke into my bedroom, violated my security, and packed my life into a bag, telling me to my face that I wasn't going to use it anyway. You thought that because I am old, I am stupid. You thought I wouldn't fight back. But we were going to pay it back, Vanessa shrieked. It was an investment. An investment in shoes and vacations yields no return, you foolish girl, I snapped back. The bank did its job. The bills were marked because I asked for them to be marked. I knew there were rats sniffing around my cheese. I just never thought the rats were sleeping in the next room. Reynolds closed the folder with a sharp thud. All right, with your statement, Adelaide, the protocol shifts from suspicion to confirmed felony. I am obligated to hand the detainees over to the federal authorities who are currently en route. Bank fraud with illicit funds and elder abuse are severe felonies. There is no immediate right to bail. The color drained from Vanessa's face. She looked gray, small, pathetic. No, that can't be, she whispered. Julian, do something. What do you want me to do, Vanessa? He screamed hysterically. My mother just pressed charges. I didn't press charges, I said, standing up. You indicted yourselves the moment you fed stolen money into the banking system. I just came to tell the truth. I walked over to the glass window and looked out into the bank lobby. 2 police officers were walking in, speaking to the receptionist. Mom! Julian threw himself at my feet, hugging my legs. He was crying just like when he was a little boy. Forgive me, I swear. We'll give it all back. I'll sell the car. We'll sell everything. Just don't let them take us. I can't survive in prison, Mom. Please. I looked down at him. He was my blood, my only son. The pain in my chest was real, sharp, like a splinter in my heart. But I remembered the phrase, "You weren't going to use it anyway." I remembered the contempt. If I saved them now, they would never learn. If I saved them now, they would do it again the second I closed my eyes for good. "Get up, Julian," I ordered. "Have a little dignity." He stood up, sniffling, trembling. "Mr. Reynolds," I said, never taking my eyes off my son. "How long before the officers come in here?" "They are in the lobby, Adelaide. 2 minutes." "1. Give me 1 minute alone with them." Reynolds nodded hesitantly, but signaled the guards to stay alert right outside the door, and left the office, pulling it shut behind him. The silence returned, but now it smelled like rancid fear. I pulled the manila envelope Ernest had given me out of my purse. "Listen closely, because I am not going to repeat myself," I said, dropping the envelope on the desk. "The money no longer exists to you. The bank will hold it as evidence, and with any luck, they will return it to me in a few months. But your accounts, your personal accounts, are going to be frozen pending the investigation. You are penniless." Vanessa sobbed, covering her mouth. "But that's not the worst part," I continued, pulling out the document with the fresh notary seal. "This morning, I revoked the power of attorney I gave you, Julian. And I established a family trust over my house and my businesses." "What? What does that mean?" Julian asked. "It means you no longer have any rights to my house, neither you, nor especially her. And there is one more clause. I changed my will. If I die, the house is sold, and the money goes entirely to public charity and a scholarship fund for low-income students. You will not see a single brick of that house." "You're disinheriting us?" Vanessa screamed in disbelief. "That's illegal." "It is my money, it is my house, and it is my will," I said, tapping my index finger on the desk. "And I have one more thing to tell you. I changed the locks. When you get out of wherever they take you, if you get out, do not try to go to my house. Your things are in boxes in the driveway. If you try to enter, I will call the police for trespassing." "Mom, you're throwing us out on the street?" Julian looked like a ghost. "You threw me out of my own life when you decided I was no longer useful. You stole the roof of my security. I am simply returning the favor. You're young. You move the world, don't you? Then move it. Find jobs. Rent a room. Live the reality I lived at your age." The door opened. Mr. Reynolds walked in accompanied by 2 police officers in blue uniforms with serious faces. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" one officer asked. I looked at Julian. His eyes begged me one last time. I looked at Vanessa. Defeated. Destroyed. "Yes, officer. Everything is perfectly clear. These people have some explaining to do regarding irregular deposits." "No! Mom! Wait!" Julian screamed as the officer grabbed his arm and slapped the handcuffs on him. The metallic click was the saddest and most satisfying sound I had heard in years. "It's a mistake. It's a mistake," Vanessa yelled as a female officer cuffed her. "My mother-in-law is crazy. Adelaide, tell them the truth." I stepped up to Vanessa, mere inches from her face. "The truth, Vanessa, is that you were right about one thing." She stopped, panting, a glimmer of hope shining in her eyes for a split second. "What?" she asked. "You said the money was stagnant and needed movement." I smiled. A cold, terrible smile. "Well, congratulations. Now the money has moved, and you are going to move too, straight to a holding cell." The officers began shoving them toward the exit. Julian was bawling, screaming my name. Vanessa was cursing. The people in the bank lobby watched the scene with morbid curiosity. Some were recording with their phones. I stood in the office, watching them drag away the 2 parasites that had sucked my energy dry for years. I felt no guilt. I felt a lightness in my shoulders I hadn't felt in decades. Mr. Reynolds approached me. "Adelaide, I am so sorry you had to go through this. I know he is your son." "He is my son, Reynolds, but I come first. And today, for the first time in a very long time, I chose myself." "How do we handle the legal process?" he asked quietly. "If you drop the charges in a few days, they might get released on probation." I looked toward the door where they had vanished. "Let them spend the weekend in lockup, Reynolds. Let them feel the heat, eat bad food, and sleep on the floor. Let them know what it feels like to have absolutely nothing. On Monday I will come back to discuss forgiveness. But forgiveness, my friend, is going to come at a very high price." I grabbed my purse and my manila envelope. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to go to the market. I need to buy fresh ingredients. Tonight I am having dinner alone, and I want my meal to taste like victory." I walked out of the bank with my head held high. The afternoon sun hit my face, but it didn't bother me anymore. It was the sun of my new life, a life where no one, ever again, would tell me I was useless. I walked toward the taxi stand. My phone started ringing again. It was an unknown number, probably some public defender, or Vanessa wasting her one phone call. I turned the phone off and buried it at the bottom of my purse. The silence that followed was simply delicious. Monday morning dawned with a silence so pure you could almost hear the dust settling on the furniture. It wasn't that tense silence, heavy with mute resentments, that had inhabited my home for the last 5 years while Vanessa and Julian lived here. No, this was a clean, fresh silence, like bedsheets freshly washed and dried in the sun. I woke up at 6 without an alarm clock, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the weight in my chest of having to hide in my own kitchen so as not to be a bother. I walked down the stairs in my robe, humming an old song. The coffee maker bubbled happily, and the aroma of spiced coffee with its hint of raw sugar and cinnamon invaded every corner. I threw the windows wide open. I let the humid, salty Gulf breeze blow in and sweep away the stale scent of expensive perfumes and lies they had left baked into the walls. I sat in my favorite armchair, the one facing the garden. From there, I could see my planters. Vanessa had thrown out my geraniums months ago because she said they looked trashy. Today, I was going to the nursery to buy 2 dozen. I was going to fill the house with flowers, with life, with loud, obnoxious colors, if I damn well pleased. The phone rang at exactly 9 o'clock. It was Ernest Tate. "Good morning, Godmother. How are you feeling today?" "Like I'm 20 years younger, Ernest. Any news?" "The bank unfroze your accounts an hour ago. The prosecutor accepted the preliminary settlement agreement since you are the victim and requested conditional leniency. The blocked funds are returning to your investment account today." I sighed, feeling my shoulders drop 2 inches in pure relief. My savings, my 40 years of sweat, were coming home. "And them?" I asked, my voice firm, but with that knot in the throat. Only a mother knows. "They got out half an hour ago. Mr. Reynolds dropped the bank charges since the funds were fully recovered, but they have criminal records now, and Godmother, they look awful. They had a very rough weekend in lockup." "That's fine, Ernest. Thank you. I will see you at the office at noon to sign the deed for the property, because that deal is still on." I hung up. I took a long sip of coffee. The house was mine again. My money was mine again. But I still had to close the final loop. I had to look them in the eyes one last time, not as the victim, but as the judge of their fate. I didn't have to wait long. At 10:30, the bell at the front gate rang timidly. It wasn't Vanessa's imperious ring, nor Julian's careless buzz. It was a brief, fearful tap. I peeked out the window. There they were. Julian was wearing the exact same clothes from Friday, wrinkled and filthy. Vanessa, the haughty Vanessa, looked like a dismantled scarecrow, no makeup, hair matted, eyes swollen from crying. They didn't have a car. It was probably still in the impound lot, or they had to take the bus. I walked out to the patio, but I didn't open the gate. I stayed on the inside, with the wrought iron bars between us. They were outside on the street, under the unforgiving sun. I was inside, in the cool shade of my property. "Mom," Julian said. His voice was a broken string. He tried to step closer, but stopped when he saw the look on my face. "Adelaide," Vanessa whispered, dropping her head. There was no trace of the woman who used to look down her nose at me. "You look terrible," I said, without touching the padlock. "It was hell, Mom," Julian sobbed. "There were awful people in there. We slept on the floor. They didn't give us anything decent to eat. I thought they were going to kill us. Hunger and a hard floor are great teachers, son. I slept on the market floor plenty of times to guard my merchandise when I started out. It never killed me. We get it now, mother-in-law. Really," Vanessa said, her voice shaking. "We made a mistake. We were stupid. We just want to come inside, take a shower, eat something. Please." I crossed my arms and stared at them. "No." The word dropped like a guillotine. They blinked, in shock. "What do you mean, no?" Julian asked. "Mom, they let us go. It's over. The scare is over for you. The blindfold is off for me." I pulled a key out of my pocket. "This is the key to the padlock, but I am not going to use it. Your things, as I warned you, are in those cardboard boxes right there on the curb. The gardener hauled them out early this morning." They looked to their right. There was a stack of boxes sealed with packing tape, their entire life of luxury, their designer clothes, their Italian shoes, reduced to cheap cardboard on a public sidewalk. "Adelaide, we have nowhere to go," Vanessa begged, crying openly. "They froze our personal accounts too. We don't even have money for a hotel. You have your health, you have your youth, and according to you, you have a modern mindset for business. Use it." Julian gripped the iron bars. "Mom, have mercy. I am your son. And because I am your mother, Julian, I am going to do what I should have done 20 years ago. I am going to let you grow up. As long as I keep fixing your life, you will just be a little boy with gray hair." I took a step closer, looking him in the eyes with an infinite, yet necessary, sadness. "A mother's love does not mean covering up for crooks. I paid your administrative bail so you wouldn't go to trial. That was my final gift. It cost me $2,500. Consider it your early inheritance." "And what are we supposed to do?" Vanessa screamed, a flash of her old hysteria returning. "Work," I answered calmly. "They are always looking for loaders down at the market, Julian. They pay cash at the end of the day. And you, Vanessa, I know you are very good with your hands when it comes to makeup. Maybe a neighborhood salon needs an assistant. Start from zero, just like I did." I turned my back on them. I heard Julian scream. "Mom!" A gut-wrenching scream, but I didn't stop. I walked toward the front door of the house, feeling like every step weighed a ton, but knowing that if I turned around, if I caved, I would condemn them to be useless forever. I walked in and shut the front door. I leaned against the wood and let out a long sigh. My heart hurt. Yes, but it was a clean pain, the pain of cleaning out an infected wound. At noon, I arrived at Ernest Tate's office. I wore my best blue dress, my hair done, and smelling of perfume. Ernest greeted me with a hug. "Ready, godmother?" "More ready than ever, son." We signed the deeds. The commercial space next to the Golden Seed was officially mine, but I wasn't going to expand my spice warehouse. I had another plan. For years, I had watched women my age, widows, retirees, sit on park benches watching life pass them by, feeling invisible, feeling exactly how Vanessa said I was, useless. Women who knew how to knit, cook, manage money, heal with herbs, but whom the modern world had thrown away. "Ernest, I want to register the name of the new business," I told him as I packed the folder. "What's it going to be called? Adelaide's Warehouse?" "No, it's going to be called the Matriarch's Kitchen. It will be a cooperative." That same afternoon, I went to the market. The rumor of what had happened with my son and daughter-in-law had already spread like wildfire. In tight neighborhoods, walls have ears. As I walked down the aisles, packed with sacks of beans and dried chilies, I noticed the looks. They weren't looks of pity, they were looks of respect, of awe. "Good afternoon, Adelaide," Chuck the butcher greeted me, tipping his hat. "Heard you put your house in order." "That's right, Chuck. Sometimes you have to prune the tree so it keeps bearing fruit." I arrived at my new space. It was dirty and dusty. I rolled up the metal shutter with a crash. The noise made several heads turn. Standing there in the dust, I visualized everything. An industrial kitchen in the back, long tables up front. We would sell homemade food, the kind that takes hours to make, mole, stews, marinades. But we would also sell crafts, knits, preserves, and most importantly, I would only hire women over 60. "Need some help, Miss Aid?" a voice asked behind me. It was Rose, a neighbor from my street. She is 68 and has lived alone ever since her kids moved up north. I always saw her looking sad, sweeping her sidewalk over and over again just to kill time. "Yes, Rose, I need a lot of help. I'm opening a business, and I need a partner who knows how to make that red rice you cook so well." Rose's eyes lit up like 2 stars. "Really? But I'm already old. Nobody hires me anymore." "Well, here, old age is the main requirement, woman. Around here, wrinkles are your resume. Come on in. Help me sweep this up. We have a lot of work to do." In the weeks that followed, my life transformed. The loneliness of my house was replaced by the bustling energy of the new project. The Matriarch's Kitchen Times opened its doors a month later. It was a massive hit. People, sick of fast plastic food, lined up to taste a stew that tasted like home, served by women who treated you like you were their own grandson. Julian and Vanessa tried to look for me 2 more times. The first time, Julian came asking to borrow money just for rent. I didn't open the door. I left a note in the mailbox with the address of a temp agency. The second time, I saw Vanessa from afar at the market. She was wearing a clerk's uniform for a cheap fabric store. She looked exhausted, no acrylic nails, her hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Our eyes locked for a second. She looked down in shame and went back to organizing rolls of fabric. I felt a twinge of pity, but also of pride. She was working. She was earning her bread. For the first time in her life, Vanessa was being a real woman. Maybe, just maybe, someday she would thank me for it. One afternoon, 6 months down the line, I was closing out the cash register at the shop. The business was thriving. We had 12 grandmothers working, laughing, feeling useful. We had even set up an emergency medical fund for all of us. I sat at the back table with my spiced coffee. I looked at my hands, those spotted hands with bulging veins that Vanessa had despised so much. Those hands had built 2 empires, one when I was young, to raise a son, and another when I was old, to rescue myself. I remembered the phrase that detonated everything. "You weren't going to use it anyway." How wrong she was. I used it. I used every single cent to plant dignity. I used my time to build a community. I used my experience to teach them that we are not disposable. Mr. Reynolds, the bank manager, walked into the shop to buy his takeout dinner, just like he did every Friday. "Adelaide, always a pleasure. Business is booming, huh?" "I can't complain, Reynolds. I can't complain. I can't complain. By the way," he said, lowering his voice, "I saw the activity in your investment account. The returns this month were excellent. Do you want to reinvest them?" I smiled. I pulled out my notepad, that old leather ledger that had been with me through thick and thin. "No, Reynolds, not this time. I want to withdraw a portion." "What for, if I may ask?" "I'm going on a trip. My partners and I are planning a weekend getaway to the beach, all of us together, to drink piña coladas and get foot massages." Reynolds let out a loud laugh. "Sounds fantastic, Adelaide. You've earned it." When he left, I was alone for a moment. The setting sun poured through the doorway. bathing the shop in a warm golden light. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. It smelled of mole, fresh tortillas, coffee, and success. I don't know how much time I have left. It could be 10 years, it could be 2 days. But one thing is certain. I am not going to spend it sitting down, waiting for the end. I am going to spend every last drop of energy, love, and money I have. Because life doesn't end when your hair turns gray. Life ends when you stop dreaming. And I, Adelaide, at 72 years old, am just beginning my greatest adventure. I stood up, closed the ledger, and turned off the lights in the shop. Outside, the Gulf Coast night was cool and full of stars. I walked toward my house with a firm step, my heels clicking on the sidewalk. Let the world know, there are no useless old women here. Here is a woman who knew how to defend her throne. And if anyone else tries to come and tell me my time has passed, they better brace themselves. Because my safe is full, my memory is intact, and above all, I have the courage of someone who knows exactly what she is worth. And that, my dears, is priceless.